Lisa. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Brittany. Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. I love reading Femtech books, and yours was one of the more shocking ones where I was highlighting things all over, taking pictures, posting it on my Facebook and LinkedIn, like, oh my gosh, did you guys know this fact or that fact? I can't believe I've been hosting this show for 2 years, and there are still really fundamental facts about women's bodies that I do not know. That is insane to me. I'm sure you get a lot of responses like that to your book. Is that true?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we also rarely take the time to go so deep. And I mean, that's also
Yeah.
something that happened in my own work. I was working in Femtech for 4.5 years and really trying to decipher the female body. And I still didn't know all of this. And it would have helped me so much in my work if I had known this from the start.
Yeah. I mean,
So
honestly, something we're going to get into the details here is in terms of like why the statement is true, but I really saw the implications for like healthcare and the legal system around women's bodies in the United States, that if we're going to literally make laws that are anatomically incorrect or biologically incorrect, that was one of the biggest things for me. So before we continue to just fangirl over this book, I would like to learn more about you. So our listeners and I, we always love to hear about the journey. Where are you from? Where did you go to school? Did you have a career? Tell us about what, culminated up into writing this book.
sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm actually an engineer to start with, an engineer in physics. So that was kind of a hard thing for me to study. It was a bit more theoretical than I had hoped for when I started. But then I found this way of branching into more life science application and also into more programming and image processing. And that was a way I really, then for the first time, I really started to enjoy what I was doing. So then I studied first in Sweden because I'm Swedish. And after my Master of Science, I moved to Switzerland where I did a PhD on brain imaging. So I was exploring new methods of finding out how different parts of the brain were connected together, how the wiring of the brain was. And those methods could then in turn be used for more fundamental research. And I really enjoyed that a lot. But when my PhD was ready, I had the choice of staying in academia or moving into industry. And to be entirely honest, I always wanted a family, I wanted kids. And I knew that if I was going into academia, I would have to be a nomad, moving around for the coming 10 years. And I was almost 30. So I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want, to focus more on. There was a very personal decision. It was because I wanted a family and not anything else. So I moved into industry and started working in a startup that were developing wearables for diabetes, to do non-invasive glucose measuring for diabetics. And that was also very interesting. And during that time, I got my 2 kids, and that was good. And then I kind of stayed in this field of the intersection between data science. Actually, it was always about data and signals. So I was between data science and medicine, and this was really the field I loved to be in. And then in 2015. The founders of a Swiss startup company called Ava Women. They contacted me because of all that previous experience I was having with developing these wearables. Mm-hmm. And they say, we want to do this. We want to create this wearable, and that will tell us when women are ovulating. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's not going to be possible. You are dreaming, that can't be. But these guys, they were so, they were so nice and so enthusiastic. I was like, oh my God, I really want to work with these people. So I went home and And I just started studying, and I was starting to read all about the hormones, how that was changing over the menstrual cycle. And I realized that, yeah, these hormones are actually driving physiological changes in our body. And it's true, maybe they could be so strong that we would be able to pinpoint ovulation. I mean, of course, there was the temperature method that has been around for a long time, where temperature goes up after ovulation. But there were also some studies, but some very vague studies, that the first half of the menstrual cycle had lower heart rate than in the second. Also, breathing rate would be different, but no one had actually measured all of these parameters continuously over the menstrual cycle. And I just felt that it was a good moment to me. For my kids were a bit bigger, and I wanted a bigger challenge. And I really liked the founders, so I just said, yes, no, you know what, I'll do it. I join you, and I started there as head of data science. And what I was doing was basically developing the algorithms for a first product for this variable that was measuring. We were measuring temperature, heart rate, breathing rate, different HRV measurements, sleep, and so on over the menstrual cycle. So
And Ava Women today is a successful wearable, fertility and contraception company, right?
Actually, we haven't got approval, or it's not we anymore. I quit. But it has not been approved for contraception yet.
But fertility, at least.
For fertility, it is. Contraception, I mean, the algorithms are there, they're working, but we need to actually prove it in a clinical study that it's solid before you can go out. It's really has very large consequences.
Oh, obviously, yeah. If you're claiming it, you won't get pregnant. Yeah, totally. Well, that sounds like such an important and interesting background that brought you to writing this book, because this book is very data driven. You are a data scientist, but the book is, for me, a really deep dive into it's like a everyday person medical book about women's bodies. It's kind of how I read it. Like, it was in my language, but I was learning about facts about the female anatomy and biology that I had not known. So can you give our listeners just a brief description and summary? What is Go Figure about?
So Go Figure, really, it is exactly what you said. It kind of explains all the mechanism that is going around in our body, how our reproductive system is working, all those hormonal interactions, how they're all led from the brain, and all the consequences they have on transformations that are continuously happening. We have, the cyclic transformation that is the menstrual cycle, but then we also have these really big transformations, puberty and menopause, and of course pregnancy, which is a huge transformation where everything in your body changes basically. And I try to explain exactly what those mechanisms are, because I think it gives you a lot of comprehension for what's happening, and also gives you a lot of tolerance towards yourself. Like, why do I feel strange at this period, or why do I feel unhappy at this phase of my pregnancy? Why do I feel like this? Is this normal? Is it not normal? And for me, it's a kind of justification. This is how I feel, and my book is answering the question, why do I feel this way?
Yeah. And why did you feel compelled to write this? Why did you feel like women needed that reason why to explain what is happening to them?
I feel that women are often not being taken very seriously. And to be quite honest, I'm an engineer in physics. I've been mainly been around men my entire life. I think myself, I've also been, guilty of not taking other women seriously, because it's very easy to relate to people that have the same problem that you do. But if you don't experience a problem yourself, it is quite difficult to take other people seriously where you simply can't relate. And I think that's really interesting to to see, for instance, if you have menstrual pains. I don't have menstrual pains, for instance. And then to see that there are other women that can't go to work because they are suffering so much. I mean, it is a bit hard to understand, but it, in my book, I was really researching why that is. And they have women that are suffering more, they have much more prostaglandins, which is contracting the uterus. So it's a real thing. They're not making this up. And I think it's a very important thing to know that it's real. It's not just in your head, even though it should be enough to say it's not just in your head, but somehow it also it helps to know that there's something more.
Well, I mean, with the history of women's health being like, we just diagnosed every female with hysteria and put her in a hospital system, the fact that we can break this down and say, hey, anatomically, biologically, metaphysically, here is what is happening. It's not in their head, right? Exactly. What have been people's responses to your book?
I mean, it's been very positive. I'm really happy to see how people have reacted, and they seem to learn a lot. And I even have gynecologists that read it that said, hey, I didn't know this. This is amazing.
Gynecologists. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not surprised. I'm not a gynecologist, but I literally talk about women's health every day for 2 years, if not longer. And I didn't know a lot of the facts in there. So not surprised.
But when I was writing the book, I was studying like crazy. I read everything. I went down, allowed myself to go down every single rabbit hole, and I was thinking, no way, this can't be true. And then I was research, I was really going deep to understand, it really is true. Oh my God.
That's incredible. Well, let's talk about some of these crazy facts, right? So I'll try to keep us on track, and everyone, please get the book. Go figure. It is amazing, by Lisa Falco. But let's talk about some of the things that I found the most shocking, and just kind of dive into it. So one of the first things I read in there that I was like, I have to question everything, is that the ovary is not connected to the fallopian tube. What? Like, that's like literally my earrings, my 3D printed reproductive health earrings are incorrect, apparently, like, what are you talking about?
I know. I was so shocked when I read that as well. And, I also had to double check, is this really true? And I mean, I don't know why that is. And the thing is, we don't know exactly how they get transported into the ovaries. Some people think it's a bit like a vacuum cleaning it in, or that there are these sticky fingers on the fallopian tubes that are grabbing them and kind of sweeping them in. But it has even happened that women that only had one ovary left, they actually got pregnant through the other fallopian tube.
What?
So
what, Lisa? This is crazy.
It is crazy. And, there's so much we don't know, and so much more research that somehow needs to be done so we truly understand this. And maybe there's a very logical explanation to all of this, but the truth is we don't know that yet.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned in the book that it was only in 2020 we discovered that sperm move in a corkscrew motion. I'm like, are you for real? It took us till 2020 to figure out the motion of the sperm. Like, we do so much fertility research. We didn't know that it wasn't wiggling, and that it was like, no one did a 3D assessment of its, physics. That's so crazy. So it also provided me with some more understanding of other diseases like endometriosis, because I just assumed like, well, I don't know how the menstrual effluent gets outside the uterus, but apparently just does. Just accept that assumption. Bye. Now that I knew that the fallopian tubes weren't blocked off, I was like, oh my God, maybe that's actually how it's getting out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, because I had the same thought as you, but I actually didn't even think about that. So maybe I didn't read it in that lens when I was doing that. Hey, that's a really interesting thought.
Okay, well, it's like a muffler pipe, right? Where like it could come out, I don't know. So y'all call in. It's not a live show. Don't call in, email me, but about, ovaries and fallopian tubes being connected. That blew my mind. The next one I wanted to talk about was there are specific seasons and times in the day when women will peak in certain hormones and when they ovulate. Tell us about that. What seasons and what times, and do we know why?
So we don't know exactly why. Most women actually they ovulate rather in the morning, and it seems to have something to do with the light because it's different on the southern hemisphere and on the northern hemisphere, and there's some seasonality in it. I mean, we have so many things that are cyclic. We have this, the melatonin that goes up in the night, for instance. Maybe that has something to do with it. I mean, these are very linked to our hormonal system in general. That's also what's happening to teenagers, for instance, that they get the shift that the melatonin comes in much later, which is why they simply can't go to bed when we want them to go to bed, and they sleep in much longer. That's also linked to those hormonal changes, and there are some links there that we don't know exactly why that happens, so we can only observe that it's a phenomenon. And we have a lot of information of when women ovulate because of IVF. So this is actually very well researched, the fact that this is it's a real thing. But exactly why they haven't looked into so much, because that doesn't help IVF, I guess.
Yeah, they're like, okay, fun fact, whatever. Pay
Yeah,
us
exactly.
prices for, but that is it's fascinating maybe for, women who are trying to get pregnant, like that might be critical information for them. I also, just as an evolutionary geneticist, get really fascinated as to like, well, why? Almost everything in biology has some kind of advantage or something, or, so I think to myself, what is it about ovulating in the morning that is the safest or best time or more successful for fertilization? I don't know. So obviously, I think almost at the end of every one of these crazy facts, we're going to be like, and we need to know more. I think we'll just end everyone like
about everything, I think.
Here's another one. Females are more likely to sprain their knee during a certain time of their menstrual cycle when playing sports. Oh my goodness. I was a sports player in high school. I played field hockey. I'm still pretty active and, exercising and stuff. I did not know, based on, where my hormones are at, that I'm more at risk of a knee sprain. So tell us about that.
Yes, I mean, that's also very new what's coming. And so I know that, for instance, some soccer teams that play on an international level, I think even the US one, or is it the UK one, that are trying to adapt their training practices according to the menstrual cycle. But a lot of these things are same. I feel ashamed to say the same answer. More research is needed because
that's okay.
the groups are, the groups are always quite small, but this has been studied in. And some studies say, oh, this is a really clear finding. Then other studies come in and say, yeah, we're not so sure anymore. But I think if you really start to track your own sports performance with your cycle, you're very likely to see certain patterns. And I'm a very I do a lot of sports, but I'm not a professional athletics in any way. And I can feel, for instance, in the second part of the cycle, I'm much more tired, and the heart rate is higher anyway in the second part of the cycle. So of course, maybe you have some less margin to your max pulse and so on in that part. And I think it's very useful for all female athletes to track their cycle and try to figure out for themselves what is working and what is not working.
Yeah.
And with
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing sports and there was like, the hard day, where you're going to run crazy amounts of miles, and then there's like the off day, but like there was no rhyme or reason for that besides like our societal schedule, but certainly not based on my biological schedule. So that, Wild AI is a fitness app that's taking this into account, and they're definitely going to crack some codes on it. So I'm wondering if Helen from Wild AI is also including any injury tracking, because maybe that could have something to do with this as well. That would be very interesting.
I also think this is very interesting that it's during the phases where there's a lot of estrogen. For me, that doesn't really make sense because one of the big things with, for instance, progesterone is that it loosens up a bit the inner musculature. Mm-hmm. So I would have spontaneously thought that would be more detrimental to your joints and to your body than the high estrogen phase. So I'm very curious actually to understand the reason why it's in this phase.
All right, you sports scientists out there, this episode is just a giant NIH proposal. Like, hey, here's all these questions that need answers to them. Take your pick. This next one almost made me mad. Honestly, it actually made me quite upset. I did not realize that we count the first day of pregnancy as the last day of your period. And the reason that is very significant is because we would literally be calling a woman pregnant prior to her even ovulating, let alone the egg being fertilized. And so this is why I got mad about this is because, right now in the United States, we've had a leak with our justice system that they are likely going to overturn Roe versus Wade and all this nonsense about regulating women's bodies. But the rules that they are making around, Oklahoma just passed a law that said abortion is illegal at time of fertilization. If we don't even understand when pregnancy starts, how are we allowed to make laws about literally hours of a biological experience, and what hour is legal and what hour is murder, quote unquote, right? So just give us the quick 411. When is pregnancy actually start, and when are we actually counting it today? So how much of pregnancy are we not actually pregnant?
Yeah, actually it's even worse than what you said, because
oh god
no, but it actually, a pregnancy is counted, like medically counted, from the first day of your menstruation.
First day. It is worse
it is even worse.
Okay, y'all.
And if you have, the average is that you would ovulate after 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then the egg would get fertilized very quickly after ovulation, but then it travels into the fallopian tube, and it will hatch in there maybe after a couple of days, and then it will continue. It continues to travel into the uterus, and then it gets stuck in the uterine wall, and this is approximately 9 days after the ovulation.
My goodness.
So it's actually not. And then it starts to produce this hormone HCG, which is a hormone that you can measure with a test. But then it takes a few more days until you can even measure.
And you say be high enough concentrations to even realize it in your urine, right?
Exactly. And that, if you are like really eagerly waiting, then you can at the earliest know this the day you would normally get your next menstruation. And average is 29 days, but there are women that are having longer cycles of 35 days. That means that they have not even missed their first menstruation when they are legally in week 5.
Oh my god.
So there is
worse than I even said, isn't it? Women could be quote unquote a month pregnant before they actually are pregnant or could test positive to be pregnant.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not that you're being sloppy or not aware. It's just like there's no way you can know if you're pregnant. And for some women that are on this rather longer cycles, there is that's 5 weeks in that you would even find out that you're pregnant.
Oh my gosh. And we have laws now coming out that is like 6 weeks, after 6 weeks, it's murder. And it's like, oh my God, if she didn't, it just, we have episodes on abortion. So y'all, you can just go tune to those. But this is for me, was super, super critical to tell people about, because the more that we know about women's anatomy and biology and physiology, we can more accurately make or not make laws, right? We can, I felt so compelled, like, please, dear God, let there be a medical doctor reviewing these legal paperwork and marking it up, saying that's literally biologically wrong. Because I obviously get very passionate about this. This blew my mind. This one was the one I was just like, I can't go to sleep yet. I have to keep reading. Let's talk about another part of pregnancy I found super fascinating. Morning sickness. You claim that potentially, and it's not you, like you from your research, that it shows potentially morning sickness is an evolutionary trait to try to preserve that early stage of the fetus. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, it's quite simple actually, and quite logic if you think about it, that the fetus really needs to to survive. And if you eat something that could potentially poison you, then you would lose the fetus and it wouldn't survive. So the purpose is to prevent you to test new things and be a bit more suspicious towards certain foods that could have a bad impact on your health. So you become very, very restricted in what you actually want to eat. So it's a survival mechanism. Everything the fetus is doing to us is like survival mechanism, trying to grab the most nutritions, and even, it's even just forming our brain so that we want to take care of it once it's out. It's quite insane what's happening in a pregnancy.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. I thought that one was similarly thought, oh, well, yeah, duh, of course, but also I never questioned morning sickness before. I was like, oh, that's just an unfortunate thing that happens. But now I'm like, oh, it's you're protecting yourself, feeling a little less upset about it.
Exactly. And I think it's almost everything happens for a reason, an evolutionary reason. It's maybe not so sexy, but it's also very cool though. And I think it allows you to be more tolerant towards it. And if you can look at it, okay, this is protective mechanism, I will have to deal with it. Maybe it makes it easier. Maybe not. I was lucky. I didn't have morning sickness. So
the next thing I found it fascinating was that breast milk doesn't just drip out, but it shoots out like a faucet. What? Like apparently the baby doesn't get anything for the first like 30 seconds of suckling. And that suckling though is the activation to a cascade of hormones, which then releases the milk from the breast into the nipple, and it can literally shoot out. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what was happening between the nipple and the baby's mouth, but I did not realize it was like the baby was turning a knob, and turning on a faucet. Tell us more about that part.
Yeah, it's what's happening is that you have this milk releasing hormones that is actually oxytocin. This is this cuddle hormone that that every touch that you have with another human being, it releases more of this oxytocin, and that has this effect that is really releasing the milk and making it spray out, together with the fact that the fetus is not fetus, sorry, it's a baby now. I
We're at the new
fetuses. Yes, now it's a baby. That it's creating a vacuum inside the mouth, and that also with that vacuum, it's also really being pulled out. But it's, I don't know, I don't think you have breastfed, because actually all women that have breastfed knows that when then the baby accidentally releases from the breast, sometimes you get completely sprayed in the face as well.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I haven't breastfed. You're right. Yeah. So I didn't know that. Moms, message us. Have you sprayed your baby in the face with your breast milk? Is that like, I had no idea.
No, that's right. Actually, there also, I had to look that up when I was writing the book. And because you can't really squirt the milk really far. And I was like, how far can it get? And I
Yeah.
was like reading, I put that in a book as well. I think there were some women that managed, to do 6 meters. I don't know how much this in
A
feet,
meter is
but
3 feet, so 6 times 3,
yeah, but like 18 feet
18
or
feet.
so.
Oh my God, that's so
You can.
far.
It's really far. It's an amazing mechanism. But the whole anatomy of the breast is also something that was only known very recently.
Mhm.
I think it was entirely rewritten in the beginning of the year 2000s or so. How these milk glands are working inside and what the anatomy really looks like. So it's also very new
Hmm.
science that's coming out there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's being sponsored. Normally these things are actually not coming from academia, but from companies developing breast pumps that have spent
Oh.
this time doing it. So.
Well, you know what? That's a really common femtech phenomenon, is that most of the research now is being done by startups. And,
Yeah.
seed rounds are essentially R&D rounds, where you're not building an MVP yet. You're building out the data set that you need in order to create the product, because no one did the research yet. So that does not surprise me too much that that's who's doing the research on it. The next thing I found and very interesting, less shocking, but interesting, was that girls today are entering puberty earlier than they ever have in history. Tell us more about that.
Again, there are many different theories why this is. And one theory is quite simple. We're better nourished. We also eat more. And the more fat you have on your body, the earlier you will come to puberty. You need to have at least 18% fat to have your first period. And in order to have regular periods, you need at least 22% of fat. And traditionally, I think, or I don't think actually, know this from statistics, that our children today, they have more fat content, and therefore that could definitely be one reason that they come into puberty earlier. But then there are a lot of more worrying theories that could be linked to pollution, that there are more hormonally active pollutants in our waters that could trigger an earlier puberty.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
More research must be done. Oh my God.
On the pollutants, there is quite a lot of research, and there are actually some places, depending on where you live, you should be a little bit careful where you get your water from, or where you get your product from. It's not everywhere, so I know here in Switzerland it's not such a big problem. There are some places in the US where you actually should be a bit careful. So I would really advise everyone to look a bit closer to the region where they're living in, and then decide if they want to drink tap water or not.
Yeah. 100%. We could dive into that too. That's another thing. I'm going to keep myself on track. The last topic I want to talk about is menopause. And listeners, by the way, again, please read this book. I tried to pick one shocking fact from each chapter, but there was so many to pick from. And as you can tell, we're over time, but it's okay because I'm excited. Last section is on menopause. So your book says that there's only 4 species that live substantially beyond menopause, or our reproductive years. And it's 4 types of males, an insect and an aphid, and then humans. So, and it's called the grandmother effect. Kind of break this down for us. I don't know why I thought like, oh yeah, lots of animals live into menopause, lots of grandmas out there and all different species, but apparently not really the case.
Yeah, this is actually very interesting, because if you think that our purpose is to reproduce, it's kind of a mystery why we live beyond our reproductive years. And there must be a reason why we do that. That must have been beneficial to our species somehow. And that is what this grandmother theory comes from. Like, what could be the benefit be? And in order trying to prove this theory, they have been looking at what happens when you have a grandmother living close by, and taking care of her grandchildren. And they have seen that women, I mean, of course, now in modern world, it's very different, but they've been looking at in other populations, which are a bit less, I'd say, I don't know what the right word is, a bit less urbanized. And you actually have a much higher survival rate of your children. And so you can spread your genes much more if you have your mother living with you and taking care of the children and helping you to collect food or make sure that everyone is doing well. And it's beneficial for a species. So it's a part of our success factor. So menopausal women are very important for us.
Women are so freaking critical to everything. I wonder, like, at this point, again, evolutionary geneticist over here, I know that us humans have really stunted a lot of our evolution because of other technological solutions. So the example I always give is, if you wear glasses or contacts, likely you would be dead, and you wouldn't reproduce and you wouldn't have a kid with astigmatism and a -5 eyesight or whatever, that wouldn't happen. Evolutionarily, you'd be filtered out, right? But yet we've maintained your life. You're here with glasses, you're reproducing kids with glasses. But do you think that there's because especially in the United States, we're such an independent culture, like grandparents and kids are not living together, right? Like as often, especially as in early times. It would be crazy to think that women's life expectancy would decrease because of the lack of need for a grandmother as humans, because we have so many other like medications to keep grandma alive, right? So probably negates itself.
Yeah, I think we kind of put evolution out of play.
Commission here, yeah. All right, grandma.
Since about 50 years back, or maybe.
Live on.
Also with IVF and everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm very curious what actually would happen. It takes a long time to see the effect of evolution. It's not happening over a couple of generations, but I mean, that would be very interesting. If it would have been, I've seen this, I read this article once, someone had modeled what the ideal human would look like if we continue to evolve according to our more basic needs. And one of the things that really struck to me was this kangaroo pouch. That would have been great, to carry around your offspring with.
Yeah.
Interesting. So humans
interesting.
with kangaroo pouches.
Our last question about the menopause is that there are actually different average ages across the globe in terms of when women go into menopause, and Latin America being the set of women that go into menopause the earliest out of all women in the world. So tell us a little bit about that.
Actually, I don't know exactly why this population is different, but again, and you also don't know if it's an ethnicity that is different or if it's a culture that is making the difference, because culture involves diet, and diet has an impact on when you go into menopause. Culture in the sense of, do you smoke? If you smoke a lot, then you actually produce more follicle stimulating hormones, which means that you ovulate more often, and this actually accelerates aging of your ovaries. So you will go earlier into menopause if you smoke, for instance. Alcohol seemed to actually have kind of the opposite effect, that you go slightly later. It's not as strong as for the smoking, but slightly later. And some speculate that this could be, there seem to be some correlations between more estrogen and more estrogen and alcohol. So that could maybe be a reason. And also, if you have higher fat content, you would also have more estrogen, because estrogen is also being produced in fat cells, especially around the waist. So if you have a little bit more fat, you're also likely to go later into menopause than if you're skinnier.
So many factors.
So many factors, which makes it very, very difficult to say, is it the ethnicity or is it the culture?
Yeah. So cool. So cool. Well, Lisa, we have run through a bunch of really shocking facts that I wanted our listeners to know. But we do have two last questioners our listeners love that we'll just bang out. And then our listeners will get your book, which, by the way, how would you suggest they get your book?
I mean, anywhere where they normally buy books online,
Okay.
you will find it. I don't have a preference
All
to.
right.
I mean,
Cool.
you can go to your local bookstore. That's always a good option, and they could order it for you.
Cool. Perfect. Well, make sure to put the link in the chat in the episode notes. But so our last two questions is we have a lot of aspiring femtech entrepreneurs that listen. So if somebody wanted to start a femtech company, what's an area in women's health and wellness that you think still needs innovating?
That's a very difficult question because I think all of them.
All of it.
There is so much left to be done. But I mean, yeah, where you have to look where the women have the most pain and then try to solve that, of course. And you would hope that with this book I would find it, but I just found that it was so broad and there is so much need. So I would just go out and ask the women in your surrounding and see what is your biggest struggle,
Yeah.
and then try to figure it out, a
Yeah,
solution for that struggle.
definitely.
Because it can be anything. It also doesn't need to be linked to health purely. I think there are some quite interesting initiatives which is around, helping better solution to help women that are victims of domestic abuse,
Mhm.
or simply if there are some jobs that are dominated by women, nursing, for instance, helping their working conditions is also femtech. It's also about improving the quality of life for women, which is how I see femtech really playing an important role. So
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. There's certainly there's a new credit card company in the United States called Sequin, and it's only giving cards to women, people who identify as women, and it is actually a debit card, but it improves your credit score, which is very important in the United States in order to get a loan for a car, get a loan for a house. Women weren't allowed to have credit cards till the 1970s in the United States, so women were very dependent on their male partner's credit score to buy a house, buy a car, and she couldn't really leave. And so I see this current day credit card for, women who are trying to build up their credit. In my mind, I see it as a way for women to leave an abusive partner, right? Because they have now the financial credentials to get their own place, their own apartment or whatever. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I am bullish on the health and wellness, but I also am very softer on the edges in terms of let's count that too.
Yeah.
What do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
Funding.
Funding, yeah.
It's always fun, but I'm really optimistic about the future because I see so much bubbling. And I mean, one of the great outcomes of my book is that I have been contacted by many femtech founders, and I see their drive and their enthusiasm and willingness to drive this forward. And I think there are quite many, at least here in Switzerland, there are many coaching programs and so on. But what you need in the end is money to be able to do this, because those first years as a founder, you have to be quite privileged to begin with, actually, to be able to take that step. If you don't have your own savings, and honestly, how many people can just be without salary for a year or two? And to have more ways of financing these first years of entrepreneurship, I think that would really help, boost the area a lot.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's mostly women starting these companies. And unless they have a rich partner or a partner with a job that has steady enough income that's big enough to cover all of them, it's almost impossible. I don't have, throughout my years of entrepreneurship, haven't had a partner that was able to cover my stuff. And it looks like me doing a lot of dog sitting. It looks like me picking up odd end part-time jobs, and people are like, what, you're a doctor and you're doing this? And I'm like, yep, because I'm not in industry. I'm trying to do my own thing, and so it definitely makes it harder. I think to myself, how many of those hours I worked for other nonsense stuff that I could have been spending on my business, you know, if I didn't have to, you know, ask myself how my rent was going to be paid next week. Right.
No, absolutely. And I think that, but that could also be a possibility for women, because I think more often than the other way around, they would get some additional funding from their partners. That's maybe more common. So maybe we should actually take advantage of that.
Ladies, quit your job, have your partner fund your passion. Yes, I'm all for that. Lisa, this has been so awesome. Yeah. Your book was incredible. I couldn't put it down. I had to read through it. It's all, you know, like totally bent and folded and marked up and dirty because I just could not put it down. So good. Please get Go Figure. Such an awesome book. Get it for a friend, get it for your partner, get it for everyone you know, because the more we know about women's bodies and our anatomy, the more informed decisions we can make, both politically, environmentally, medically, all over the place. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much.